Welcome to the Scam Economy with your host, Matt Binder. It is an all-ape episode of the show as we dive into the barrel of monkeys known as the Bored Ape Yacht Club. This isn't the first time we've talked about the Bored Apes on this show, but two journalists at Fast Company just recently got to sit down with the Bored Ape Yacht Club parent company, Yuga Labs, and they're giving Scam Economy an inside scoop about everybody's favorite, or least favorite, NFT project. This is the longest episode of Scam Economy thus far, so I'm not gonna go too long here in the intro. But if you like the episode or like the show as a whole and want to hear or see more of this type of content, please support the show at patreon.com/Matt Binder. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Matt Binder. Follow the Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Matt Binder. Follow me on Twitter at Matt Binder. Follow the show on Twitter at Scam Economy. And go to scameconomy.com for all the links to the podcast version of the show. And be sure to leave a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Now it's time to go behind the banana peel and take a look into the Bored Ape Yacht Club and Yuga Labs. And joining me now to discuss all of this, fresh off the publication of their feature in Fast Company, the 800-pound gorilla of crypto, the Bored Ape Yacht Club tell-all, is associate editor at Fast Company, Yasmin Gagne, and reporter at Fast Company, Connie Lin. Yaz, Connie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
So this piece is super interesting because, well, first of all, there is a lot in this, this feature. And there are things that I was reading through that I thought, I'm glad this is now, the timeline has now been confirmed by someone officially within Bored Ape Yacht Club and their parent company, Yuga Labs. And then there's a lot of things that you sort of have to read between the lines that wasn't included in the piece, but that also speaks volumes. And I think you guys will be able to tell me, even fill in some of those gaps, because I'm sure there's some stuff that you guys heard from them that didn't make it into the piece.
Mm-hmm. Well, the piece is certainly the longest I think either of us have written. It's 6,000 words long, and even at that length, there was a lot on the cutting room floor.
This is probably one of the only times, I know they've probably, given interviews with some other outlets, but this is probably the deepest dive I've seen with the Bored Ape Yacht Club founders. So how did this come about?
So Connie, do you want to take this?
Sure, I can field this one. So I think there were kind of two parts to it, right? The first was like Yuga just kind of being willing to come forward and sort of tell their story and, come out of the shadows, because they had been so anonymous for such a long time. But, in February, they were doxxed against their will by BuzzFeed. And so I think that was kind of good motivation for them to start talking to publications and sort of try to take control of the narrative again. Because around that time, in the sort of the first half of the year, Yuga was kind of growing a lot, right? Like in March, it sort of it received that $4 billion valuation from a funding round led by A16Z. And, like when you get that big, I think like the controversies sort of start to come around. So I think the public sentiment had been very, like it was at that inflection point where it had like been going up, and now it was starting to come down. And, that was due to like a number of things, like, Yuga's growth itself was kind of raising a lot of eyebrows, like when they acquired two of the biggest NFT collections, CryptoPunks and Meebits, from Larva Labs, that sort of like people started to ask, well, is this looking a lot like an NFT conglomerate, you know. Or, you know, when they announced Otherside, they had this land sale that ended up being this huge disaster. Yeah, and also I think like around that time, their assets had been sort of spiking just ahead of a lot of these big announcements. And so then people were starting to question, like, are there leaks coming out of the company? So that's kind of like a long-winded way of saying that, like, they were getting a lot of negative attention at the time. And so I think they really wanted to try to get back and take back the narrative. And so they hired a PR firm, and this PR firm knew our editor, David. And so they reached out to him. And there was actually there were sort of a series of conversations that had to happen before, you know, they settled on, I think at the time they were sort of shopping around for a publication that was going to be the best outlet to tell their story. And so they met, you know, first with our editor, David, and then we met with them a second time and I joined. So it was, you know, I had lunch with David and Nicole, the CEO, and then their whole PR team. And then Yaz got involved. And then and then, you know, we started work on this in early July.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's some time ago.
I know.
Yeah.
It took a while. What I would add to that is, you know, fundamentally, and this is what the story is about, is 18 months ago, this company didn't even exist. Now it's worth $4 billion. And I think they just had to become a professional organization, you know, and like every other billion-dollar company, they had to start talking to press, you know, like even Jeff Bezos has to do an interview once in a while or make a statement. Like, so
Right.
This is sort of like, I think them talking to press is like just part of their journey into becoming more established. I would also, to go into the Ryder Ripp's stuff. So Ryder Ripp is a conceptual artist, and he found, and others observed too, that there was some kind of iconography in BAYC that he thought was sort of related to German imperialism. And that narrative really actually started to take hold. There's a video, look, to be honest, Connie and I did a lot of did our due diligence on it. We personally didn't totally buy it. I think there's a lot of things that are there's a lot of things that raise eyebrows in the story Bored Apes. Like, I don't think we wrote a puff piece, but this was not the one that we felt like we had to concentrate on. I was saying, you know, if you've ever seen the horror movie, The Number 23, starring Jim Carrey, and like all of that movie is him like doing math, you know what I mean? He's like, you're born on the 14th of September, like 9 plus 14, that's 23. Like, he sees the number everywhere. And there's a YouTube video that Ryder Ripp's made, and we both of us like watched a lot of it, and it's like it's a lot of math. And I think that when you want to find something that badly, you can. That's not to say, you know, the ADL looked into it. They weren't like, this is totally bad. They did say there was some imagery that was like a little not great.
Right.
But that's not what we wanted to focus on in the piece, because we really wanted to treat this as a business, you know? We really wanted to look at it as a business. We really wanted to ask, like, what are these NFTs? Should they be considered securities? And that's kind of how we went about reporting.
Right. No, we'll get into the Ryder Ripp stuff a little bit. You know, we spoke about a lot of things that maybe some listeners, viewers of the show, are probably completely unaware of. So we'll rewind back at the very beginning in just 1 second. The one thing I do want to talk about while we're here is, you know, you mentioned, you know, your reporting was on, you know, a business, looking at Yuga Labs as this business, because they are now they're valued at multi-billions of dollars. They have revenue in the hundreds of millions of dollars from selling these NFTs, and then the sales, the you know, the aftermarket sales of the NFTs. So to me, what I want to talk about right here, and you mentioned it just seconds ago, was the reaction to, on their end, their reaction to being doxxed. And to me, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Like, I really think they did themselves, like, if everything they're doing is actually really on the up and up, and they're really just these, it started with these, and you'll get more detailed into it, but if it's really just these two, everyday friends who brought in some other friends together with their, and told them their idea, and then they just organically sold these NFTs that all of a sudden just sold out and became this huge, sort of like street art, pop cultural thing.
Gee, Matt, it sounds like you're kind of skeptical.
Yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical, and with good reason, which we'll get into more detailed. But again, like, I want to stick to their reaction to being doxxed. If everything was just on the up and up, to me, their reaction to being doxxed makes zero sense. They and I'll never forget the video, and I'll play it here for listeners and viewers. Right after I give it some context. This is their CEO, Nicole Muniz. She did this like interview with some like crypto publication, a video interview about them being doxxed when it first happened. And her delivery, her tone of voice, the way she's portraying what just happened does not at all fit with just a bunch of people running this business being, their real names being put out there. Again, BuzzFeed found these names, their legal names, in public legal documents that really anyone could have found. These weren't like hidden. They didn't do any, the BuzzFeed reporter, Katie Nadopoulos, sorry, Katie, if I'm messing up your last name, but, kudos to her for thinking to do it. But she even says, like, there wasn't any deep digging into, like, she just literally thought to look into these public documents that anyone had access to, and their names were right there in like the legal papers for the business. And their CEO, Nicole Muniz, in this video is literally like, listen to it. Here you go.
Being doxxed, right? Having your identity put out there. How did the founders feel about that? How did you feel about that?
We believe in freedom of the press. We believe in journalistic integrity. When I got the phone call saying that they were going to release their identities, I asked for time so that we could tell their families, so that we could make sure that they were safe. I was told I had 30 minutes.
And folks in the community, when this happened, said, you have to be careful because there's safety issues. Can you explain why?
In the crypto community, there are these things called crypto whales, right? It's people who have made a lot of money in crypto, and it's attracted some nefarious characters, and it has put people in severe jeopardy. There are kidnappings, just very, very bad stuff happen. And there is honestly a misconception that the founders of this company are crypto whales. And releasing their identities and frankly only giving us 30 minutes was very, very dangerous.
She's literally delivering this speech, these prepared remarks, as if she's on the news describing a terrorist attack that just happened. It does not fit the events she's describing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that, and I actually to me, what's the best way to put this? That BuzzFeed reporter did a great job, right? She was doing her job and she did a good job. I think that at the same time, I have some empathy for them in the sense that I think the company and the project took off so quickly. And I'm not saying they didn't want to make money. I'm not saying there wasn't some like plan there, but I can see how like all of a sudden becoming a public person is pretty scary. And I can see how feeling not in control of something when you've been pretty in control of the project the whole time can feel bad. I'm not saying that they reacted the right way. Like, I'm not saying that was the right reaction, but I get it, you know?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't have that same empathy for it because, again, we're talking about people who by this time have already made hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, if they were really worried, I believe she said she was worried about like them being kidnapped, as if, you know, they're literally millionaires, billionaires who are public figures. You know, again, these are guys in their 30s. There are people in their teens and their 20s who are thrust in this situation. And then outside of, so they have money to even, you know, take care of whatever issues they're worried about, if they need to hire security or whatever. But then going even further, there are also plenty of people who go public or are, you know, their names are publicized because, you know, they unwillingly ended up doing something that turned them into public figures, who don't even have the money. And just, you know, and they don't act this way. It was just so bizarre. And as people who are running this huge corporation that have millions of dollars in funding from, you know, established venture capital firms who are not selling a service or product. So basically, the way they make money are from retail investors buying these NFTs in hopes of they too making money from reselling them or, you know, holding on to them till they can resell them for the price they're holding out for. They have a right to know exactly who they're investing with. They have a right to know, you know, do these people have a racist background like Ryder Ripp's alleges? You know, they have a right to know if these guys are literal criminals. They you know, it's just part of the whole situation. Like this was going to happen.
Yeah, I totally get it. I just have some empathy for people who were private until recently. And I say this partly because I don't know, like I became a writer so that I could just
they
write,
do,
you know.
I got to ask you because
by the publicity. Yeah.
What was that? I'm sorry.
They seemed very spooked by the publicity. I think it was a shock.
One funny moment though was like we were in our first interview with them. We were like, this is like off the record. We were like, where do you guys live? And they were like, this is off the record. This is so off the record. And they told us what coast they lived on. We were like,
the only time they went off the record was to tell us which half of the
yeah. Like what?
Yeah.
Can I ask you this? I know you guys, you know, get it in terms of my argument.
Totally.
Did that come up with them though? Like, do they get why they had to be doxxed, or are they still like pissed that it happened and thought they could continue to run this business without having to ever go public with their real names?
It's funny. I feel like they're pissed that it happened, but they also recognize that they need a publicity strategy now. You know what I mean? Like,
but that's not what I'm asking. That's not what I'm asking. Did they think? Did they realize? Maybe maybe you didn't get this out of them, but did they realize that this was a necessity? Like, I get they now know.
I don't think they did. And I think that I got the impression that they had some personal incidents. Like, you know, one of them was like, this guy showed up at my house. And I was like, that's scary, right? That's just scary for anyone. So I think that's where that reaction came from, if that makes sense. Like, it was a purely emotional, like, I don't feel good about this. And I don't think they thought even like, as far as the business, they were just like, I really hate this. You know what I mean?
Well,
I think this is also something that's very new. You know, like, we haven't really seen this before because NFT culture is just it's like a very niche sort of subculture right now where like it's sort of founded on having this online alter ego, right? Like, you have like your NFT character profile picture that's like your hexagon on Twitter, and you have like anonymous Discord chats. And so you sort of create this online persona, and nobody has to know who you are. That's like a big part of what the appeal of NFTs is right now, and the social appeal, online. So I think that they were still very much living in that world. And I mean, they were familiar, like they were gamers growing up, right? Like they played, Star Wars and Warcraft and StarCraft and all of that. And so I think they were like very familiar with this idea of just like having an online persona that might have been separate from who you were in real life. And like having those two converge wasn't really something that they were used to. But, suddenly it was sort of like they were like, thrown into this situation. But I think it's something that we're going to just start to see more of, because we haven't seen a really big NFT company yet, right? So like, yes, when there's a $4 billion company, we feel like we need to know who is running that, But that hasn't happened before. So I think
neither of us are disagreeing with you, Matt. You know what I mean? Like, neither of us are like, no, their identities should.
No, I get that. No.
Have some empathy for like where they were coming from.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I still am so like, the thing to me is like, it sounds like they're incredibly naive if they thought that they could, it was just going to be like using their video game screen names or whatever and get through life doing that. But I mean, like,
one of them is named after the villain from the Smurfs.
Gargamel, right? Right. We'll get into we'll do that in a second. But also, like, it also keeps striking me like these are grown men in their 30s. Like, what are they like? And I get what you're saying. Like, this is actually a broader problem within the crypto and NFT space, where they value their anonymity. And I mean, I get it if you're just a guy buying tokens or investing in NFTs. Like, okay, I mean, sure, you could be anonymous, but when people are then entrusting their money into your product or, your project or whatever, then that's a very different thing. And I think this idea of like they could run this as if they all just go by their Fortnite screen names is probably why this space is so overrun with scams and hackers.
You think about even like the foundations of crypto, and it's like we still don't know. I mean, okay, Connie is the real crypto reporter here, but am I crazy in saying we don't know the guy who started Bitcoin? You know what I mean? Like, right. Like it's like just everything about this space is like sort of like weird when it comes to that stuff.
Right. Yeah, and it's not a good thing. Like
no, it's
like when it comes to like, I am all for people being able to have their privacy, obviously, on a number of issues. But and this is just an opinion here from me, but when it comes to financial information, especially when we're talking about mega corporations and companies and very powerful people, then I'm sorry, they have no right to hide who they are, where they're spending their money, what their money is going to, because that's how you get a country that, you got very powerful people basically being able to run so many things with lobbyists and dark money going to super PACs. I mean, there's a lot of money in crypto. It's going to be something to watch where these people spend their money and how they do it. And they should not have an anonymity to be able to control, policy in this country.
Yeah. And if anything, I feel like the doxing, for better or worse, is kind of going to be a precedent, I think, for like, the next big company, like, even if it's within crypto, even if like anonymity is such a, like a holy grail of the industry, like you can't stay hidden, right? Like, and I think that's just going to be clear now.
Right.
But it is a really strange dichotomy. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, go ahead. No, please go ahead.
I think it is a really strange dichotomy because, so much of Web3 is built on being like open source, and like that sort of radical like community aspect, but like at the same time you're hiding who you are. At the same time, anonymity is such an important sort of tenet of their philosophy. So it's just kind of a weird dichotomy to think about.
Right. No, absolutely. And so let's now jump into this piece. We just had a whole conversation that, I mean, obviously was about the piece, but let's jump into the details here. So let's for people who don't know, I guess we should explain really quickly. I have done it many times before, but never know if there's a new listener, the first episode, for them. What is an NFT, Connie?
What is an NFT? Well, it is.
I'm so glad you asked Connie that and not me.
I had a feeling she'd be the better person to ask.
Oh, man, I'll do my best. An NFT is a non-fungible token, and it's really kind of a way to track ownership of assets on the blockchain. So a lot of like NFTs that you will see are JPEGs, right? Because in the past, like there was no real way to own a JPEG. Anybody could download that onto their computer, and
Yeah.
So I think that assigning the blockchain to that gives you a way to sort of claim ownership and be the only owner of an asset. So the blockchain is basically like a digital ledger that like just encodes like tons and tons of information, including who owns what, across the world. And so if you own a JPEG, that will be encoded into the blockchain, which is like growing infinitely, right? Like that once it's encoded, it can never be removed. So like your ownership is like cemented into eternity. And yeah, I think that's a big part of the appeal for a lot of people is the idea that like, one, you can claim ownership, two, like that can't be erased. 3, that's a way for you to start to monetize these assets, right? Because if you own a JPEG and like you can prove your ownership of it, you can also charge for loaning it out or doing whatever you want with it or selling it or all of that. I wonder if that makes sense.
It absolutely does, and I'm glad you answered it because I always was wondering. I really want to be the guy who owns the troll face JPEG from back in the. I don't want anyone else to use it. I've been begging away, but we should also add that, like, to make it completely sort of technically clear too. It's just a receipt. Like that's really what because we could always I can buy an NFT of that troll face I just mentioned. I'm really putting an age on myself here of when. When that's the height of memes for me. But anyone could still copy the JPEG. It'd still be, all these things are still used. You see people using, Bored Ape avatars to mock Bored Ape Yacht Club people because they're able to just copy the image still because it's still just a JPEG. But
I thought about doing that as like a dumb trolly thing when this article came out.
Right. That would be pretty good. You should do that. Put it up tonight, right? But But these NFT holders literally just have like the proof that they paid this amount on the blockchain for the token connected to that JPEG. And I mean, wow. That's all I have to say there. Wow.
Damn, I wish I had that kind of money.
Yeah. I mean, just throw that down the toilet. But let's now get into the beginnings of the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Can you tell us how this whole thing started?
Connie, do you want to go for it?
Sure, I will do my best. So the story that Gordon and Garga tell, which you've probably seen because it's been online, it's sort of their origin story, is that it was almost like a fever dream from Gordon one night. And he had kind of like, he's in his mid-30s now, but he had never really had a real job. He had this sort of chronic illness that kept him in bed for most of his 20s. And so he was just kind of, like floating around and like trading cryptocurrencies and losing a bunch of money in 2018 and just kind of trying to figure out what was next.
Wait, what? It just struck me. Where did he have totally? It's that's very. I'm glad he's doing better now because that's sad that he was sick and couldn't work. Where did this money to invest in crypto back in? When was he investing in crypto?
Like very early on.
I think.
But 2017, we're still talking about crypto. Bitcoin's trading at 16, 17K at this point.
No, I mean, I think he was investing earlier. It's more that like when crypto crashed, he like lost a bunch of money.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
But where did he get into how he got into crypto and why, where his funding of crypto was coming from? Because I mean, if I didn't have a job and needed to pay for food, rent, etc.
I gotta say, I don't totally know where the funding came from, but I think he got into crypto just like from being part of weird corners of the internet. You know what I mean? I don't think there was like some like crazy thing that happened. I think he was just like really online on like Reddits that I don't go on.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. I'm sort of wondering, maybe he was this is just, me thinking, I don't know. Maybe it's just, who knows where he got this money from. But, I was sort of asking if his parents were somebody's, maybe a trust fund kid or something. I have no idea. Yeah.
I don't want to speculate on it.
Yeah,
and I'm also just like, you know what? You were really sick. That's awful.
Right. No, of course. Right. Right. So go ahead. Sorry, it just caught me and I needed to ask. Go ahead.
No worries. So this is him in his 20s, just trying to figure things out. And then I guess when the NFT boom started happening, I think in like early 2021, he was kind of like, oh, maybe there's something there. And so I guess he just kind of like stayed up one night and just dreamt up this whole narrative of like these NFT bored apes, which are just like congregating in some like apocalyptic bathroom, scrawling on this stall wall because they're like, and they're rich from like investing in crypto, and now they're bored, like, because they have nothing to do with their money. And so he sort of came up with this whole narrative, and then scribbled it all down. And then his friend Garga, who was an editor who was working at a publishing company at the time, kind of came in and helped refine that. And so that's sort of the story that they tell that, originated this whole like now $4 billion enterprise. So it's the Cinderella storytelling of it. But, like, obviously, as Yaz and I were reporting, it became clear to us that it didn't just magically happen, right? Like,
yeah, I think like the key thing that I think about as it was founded is the company's current CEO, Nicole Muniz, was a childhood friend of Gordon's, and as he and Garga had been exploring ideas around NFTs, they originally had this concept of like doing some like Miro, the artist inspired NFTs. They were batting these ideas around to her. She was a digital strategist. She had her own firm. And she was like basically talking to them about ideas that would be commercially viable, like what aesthetic would actually sell. And, she at the time was like, listen, like when you give people a whiteboard, because the idea was that like anyone who bought an NFT would have access to this whiteboard to draw on. The first thing they draw is a dick. So let's like try and make some art that sort of appeals to that type of trolley aesthetic. And I think like this they've said in a bunch of interviews, but I think what I took from that was like they were thinking about making money from the beginning. I don't think they thought this was going to grow into a $4 billion company, but this wasn't just like a cute art project that they like hadn't thought about at all, that they just put out there. Do you know what I mean?
Right. There was some preparation for it, and it took them a little bit to get to where they were. They just right.
Yeah, so, and I think also what struck me. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I think what sort of struck me is that they mentioned that the idea for the Mutant Ape Yacht Club, which is basically like the follow-up to Bored Ape Yacht Club, the expansion of the universe, and it became their second NFT collection. They started working on that literally the day after BAYC sold out. So like the day after the launch of Bored Ape Yacht Club, they were already working on the expansion. So that, there was hustle, right? Like they were building something, they brought in an executor to help them like build this thing, make money. And so it, I feel like it's where it is today is very much like a product of a lot of smart business decisions.
Yeah.
Right. So let's actually, you bring up a point. You jumped to the Mutant Ape Yacht Club, which was interesting to me because in the piece, it seems like they didn't want to talk so much about that launch of the Bored Ape Yacht Club beyond like, oh, they all sold out. Like, I know there was a week of pre-sales, and then it officially launched on May 1st. And then these 10,000 Bored Ape Yacht Club NFTs sold out by the end of May 1st. Did they get into at all how that happened? How they were able to sell 10,000 NFTs by having no sort of background in the space? They weren't influencers previously. They were just two guys who ran this idea past their digital marketer friend, and then they just put this out there.
Well, look, I think their party line, and obviously like there's a lot of questions around Bored Ape Yacht Club and Yuga Labs' dealings in general that kind of circle around this issue of like, was there a plan, or were there people who stood to benefit, that like were during sales? So what they say is that, the Bored Apes were available to be purchased for a week, and they really didn't take off for most of that week. And then on the last day, because actually, just to back up, I just want to sort of briefly explain how a lot of NFT projects work, which is that there's a limited number of NFTs that are going to be released, that's announced, and people can purchase them. But when they purchase them, for 6 days of that week, they're actually unable to see them. So they're unable to like see what their NFT looks like, their piece of art. And then on the 7th day, or on the 6th, towards the end of the week, that artwork gets revealed. So with the Bored Apes, what ended up happening, by their accounts, is that no one was interested in the project for like the first 5 days. And then as soon as people started seeing the artwork, seeing the apes in their weird colors and with their weird accessories, they were really into the apes aesthetic, and they sold out immediately. So that's their claim. They basically say that, and their argument is that the apes had an aesthetic appeal because people could really recognize themselves in their apes, and really found some kind of digital identity that way. I think it's possible. I think I think the thing that has raised questions for some people is that some people bought a shit ton of apes. Right. Normally you buy one or two, and I think that's the sort of that kind of accusation, that kind of not accusation, but those questions of who knew what was coming beforehand, is something that has dogged the company for a long time. So another instance later on is the company acquired CryptoPunks, which was another really popular NFT chain. And they had been working with this guy from Christie's, the auction house, named Noah Davis. He'd helped sell a couple CryptoPunks, and he was later brought on as brand manager of CryptoPunks, working at Yuga Labs. But the day before he was brought on as brand manager, somehow a few people knew about it on the Bored Ape Discord, and the price of CryptoPunks shot up.
I think it's a few hours to clarify. Yeah,
a few hours. But all this to say, I think, I think stuff like that is, I think, what makes people mistrustful or suspicious of Yuga Labs. And honestly, in our reporting, we couldn't figure it out, But I think we tried to just show hey, some people have questions, at the very least, that's part of when I said we were really trying to treat Yuga Labs as a business and report on it as a business, that's kind of where we were coming from, which is if we think of these as securities, is there some kind of insider trading going on? I don't know. We couldn't prove it. We don't know. But what we can say based on our reporting, based on talking to people, is a lot of people have questions about that aspect of the story.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't know that fact that, on that day that Bored Ape Yacht Club sold out, I believe there were 10 wallets that at the end of that day held something like over 30% of the 10,000 Bored Ape Yacht Club NFTs. I mean, again, they weren't trading anywhere near like the $100,000 that just one fetches for now, but we're still talking about, I think it was around like $250 when you, in US dollars, you have to use you would buy a Bored Ape with Ethereum, Ether on the Ethereum blockchain, the Ethereum network. But I mean, that's still like $250 per ape. So we're talking still a lot of money.
Like rich people spend their money on, like Elon Musk literally during this recording officially bought Twitter. You know what I mean? And like no one thought that was smart.
Wow, Twitter's a proven, and I know what you're saying, but Twitter's like a yeah.
I know
these were monkey JPEGs.
This is not a great example. I guess all I'm saying is like, on one level you could look at it and be like, oh, did they know something about this? And were they trying to make the value go up, or did they know the value was going to go up? But on the other hand, you could just be like, maybe there's just like a rich person who loves this stuff. I think that's sort of the thing at every turn of the story. You're like, it could be this or it could be this. And like, you can start to feel a little crazy, when you try and like parse it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think there's something more there that nobody's been able to really get yet. But I think it's interesting that they don't find literally that week or so to be that important to talk about in detail. Like, that's very bizarre. I would have been, given the week that I went from a nobody to a somebody, like that. Yeah, that seems like something you detail. Again, their unwillingness to sort of be more transparent makes me very suspicious. But yeah, I mean, until we know, all we could do is speculate and wonder. But let's talk about the people. I know we've mentioned them so far as Gordon Goner and Gargamel, the original two, and if that's the names they want to go by, that's fine. But we should at least mention once what their real names are. I mean, it's important, I think. And Gargamel is Greg Solano. And Gordon Goner is Wylie Aronow, who I did not realize. I just thought he was Willie spelt with a Y, but we were talking prior to this, and you informed me that his name was actually Wylie, like Wile E. Coyote.
Like Wile E. Coyote.
There we go. All right. So I learned new things about Bored Apes and the Yuga Labs, but I also learned new things about pronunciations.
Yeah.
And so the other two guys who are part of this is Zeshan Ali, who goes by No Sass, and Kerem Atalay, who goes by Emperor Tomato Ketchup.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Very.
I do think No Sass is a really funny name.
No Sass is pretty. Of the four, I'll give it to No Sass being pretty good.
Exactly.
But I do want to mention here that the four of these guys, none of them are artists, correct?
That's correct.
Two of them are developers. The last two I named, No Sass and Tomato Ketchup, Emperor Tomato Ketchup, and Gordon Goner is the guy who was sick for a while, so he didn't really. This was his first real thing. And then Gargamel had marketing jobs with like startups or something.
No, Garga has an MFA in poetry from UVA.
Oh, okay.
He specialized in American poetry, and then he became an editor at for a small press that did a lot of books on stuff like gaming.
Right. I was thinking of the CEO. Right. We'll get to the CEO in a second. Yeah. We'll get back to her. Yeah. But. See, this is the thing, to me, that really sort of bothers me about the NFT space and the Bored Ape Yacht Club being, the flag bearer. We are sold that the idea behind NFTs is great because it is a way for artists to make money.
Mm-hmm.
They can mint their art, whatever medium they partake in, whether it's, digital art, fine arts, paintings, music, film, and they could mint it on the blockchain and sell the NFTs for that. And then on top of that, the extra benefit too is that because this is on the blockchain, every time these pieces, the NFTs, get sold on the aftermarket,
Mm-hmm.
a percentage of that aftermarket sale also goes to the original artist of that piece as royalty. And I mean, I guess if you're just getting into this and you are an artist and you don't know all the details, this sounds great. Artists struggle to make money in modern day. It's a hard thing to do. And so this seems like a great idea. But then you look at who the biggest project in the NFT space is, the one that, the NFT advocates have decided to hold up on this pedestal. And you find out that the 4 guys behind it who are making all this money hand over fist, they're not artists at all. They have nothing to do with the digital art, that, the creation of, the drawing of these bored apes. They just were people who had this business idea, and they're now the face of this thing that's supposed to be this big boon for artists.
I would say two things about that. One, which is like one of the original artists, Seneca, has spoken at length about the fact that she feels like she was not compensated adequately or given credit, given how she created like the original line drawings of the apes, given how much it's taken off. So I think that's definitely a conversation that that needs to be had, that people are having. It's out there. I will say one thing though, which is they may not be visual artists, but Gordon, one of the founders, did create the storyline for the apes and basically the vibe of the apes. Now, I don't even know if I totally buy this argument, but I can see like that argument doesn't not make sense to me.
That is their art. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess to sort of add on to what you're saying, Matt, yeah, I agree. I think, it's one of the biggest pitches of NFTs is sort of as a way for artists to like own their work and, collect on their work, especially in something like the music industry that's been so notorious for like trying to like, wring every drop out of the artists. And so, the illustrators for Bored Apes not being sort of compensated, maybe appropriately or properly, is definitely a huge issue. And I think that like I think that there was a lot that happened during the launch of BAYC that just was not ideal. And I don't think that it was intentional necessarily. I think that like it was probably just a product of inexperience. Like I think that there was a lot that they were doing with this model that was new, right? Like one of the biggest pitches is that they were essentially giving away, well, how they sort of framed it was that they were giving away the IP for like, so like this character, this illustration then became yours for you to do whatever you wanted with it, to brand it, monetize it, license, it was licensed out to you. And that, there wasn't really a roadmap for doing something like that. So I think, I think the issue of royalties sort of maybe they like didn't get quite right. I mean, there was also, an issue with the smart contract language itself. Like when you looked at like whether or not like the IP was actually licensed out to people properly, when people started parsing that language, they saw that like, well, maybe, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm gonna, try my best to get this right. But yeah, I think it was like there was an issue with the copyright where it was like who owned the copyright. That was still Yuga, which meant that they still owned the IP. So even though the pitch was you own the ape and that's all, like you didn't actually own the ape. You were just lent the ape, and so I think that there was a lot that they didn't get right, right off the bat. And that was probably just a product of, you know, they weren't lawyers, right? Like it wasn't, and it didn't have to be like an intentional, like try to.
I have to say, I didn't get, you know, there's some stuff like ApeCoin, which we'll get to, that makes me suspicious, but actually, when it comes to the right stuff, especially, I don't necessarily think they're bad actors. I think they literally are just not lawyers. Like I do actually think.
Yeah,
just from
I could see for the early stuff for Bored Ape Yacht Club. By
the time
the early stuff, by the time ApeCoin comes out, it's very purposeful. I think we'll get to ApeCoin in a second, for sure. But so yeah, I mean, it is, you know, I get that they give the IP to the NFT holders, but my thing there is like, and this isn't just Bored Ape Yacht Club, this is the NFT space in general, constantly creating these characters and sort of trying to like say like, isn't it amazing that you could do whatever you want if, you know, if it's one of those similar projects that give the IP, because it's like characters are nothing without like in your piece you mention a lot where like they sort of view themselves as like a potential Disney. Or, you know, and like Disney sells stories. The characters that come out of those stories are a product of the story. Like you can't have like these characters are nothing without the story. If they just threw, whoever out there, the Disney princesses, even Mickey Mouse starting, they were cartoon episodes that took off and made him an iconic character. It wasn't like they just plastered a mouse drawing everywhere and said, look how cool this is, and everyone was like, this is going to be an American icon. No, it was because the stories created the character that is the icon, that is Mickey Mouse or whatever. And, you know, I'm not trying to talk up Disney. You know, they have their own problems, but that is why they're so successful. And, like, this is backwards. Like, no one cares about these Bored Apes because there's no story behind them. Like, there isn't. Like, I know you said...
There is a story behind them. I don't know that people care about it. Like, I'm actually not disagreeing with you.
Well, some people are starting to create stories around their specific apes. Like Jenkins the valet, who, you know, is just this ape that looks like a valet because he has a hat and a vest and all that. And so, you know, there's a group called Tally Labs who is sort of like creating a whole narrative around Jenkins and his life and what he does. And that same group is now like creating a novel. And, you know, now there's like a TV show coming out with, you know, the actor Seth Green is making a TV show out of his ape called Fred. And, you know, obviously there was a whole, you know, situation with that too when Seth Green's ape got hacked and stolen. And then, you know, because of the whole issue of IP belonging to whoever owns the NFT on the blockchain, then he ran into an issue where he was like, oh, can I still make the show without my NFT? And that was a whole separate issue. But anyway, people are starting to sort of find ways to like create that backstory for their apes.
One argument I can see, and I don't, you know, because I initially came into the story really agreeing with you, and I think I'm not totally on the other side either. I just haven't made up my mind on this. But one thing I can say is that Bored Apes, like, people know about them. You know what I mean? It's like some marketing that's ready made for you. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to found a company based on your Bored Ape or the imagery, like, it's already recognizable. You know, you don't need to do the work of like putting an entirely new image out there.
Right. The haters are already built in too. So
exactly.
Because a lot of people hate these Bored Apes, and I think I count myself as one of them. So let's talk about now. We had mentioned her briefly, and there's this line that really sticks out to me in your piece. That again, one of those really telling things that I'm so glad it came out in this piece, and that's, you know, the CEO of Yuga Labs, Nicole Muniz, who you said, you know, they were her and one of the original founders were childhood friends.
Yeah.
And she was a digital marketer or a PR person or something. And she gave them a lot of advice.
I actually want to give her credit here. She was a digital strategist. So she like launched a lot of projects for companies like Google. So I just want to say, I think she's like more than a marketer.
Okay. Okay, but
Yeah.
there's this line here that sticks out to me in this piece.
Yeah.
And she's describing the consultancy firm that she was running as McKinsey, but for startups. And now I don't know if this is because this is just how people within this like corporate PR bubble view McKinsey as just like this shining North Star, this beacon of light that we should all aspire to be. But for people outside that world who are familiar with the name McKinsey, their first thoughts when hearing that name is probably not good. McKinsey has a history riddled with scandals. They worked with Enron. Most recently, just off the top of my head, I know that last year they had to pay a $600 million settlement for their role in the opioid crisis. So, if I'm looking to frame myself as just someone who, was trying to help my friends create this completely organic thing with no funny business behind it, I probably wouldn't compare myself to McKinsey.
I'll say this as a counterpoint. McKinsey, despite being like honestly very shady, did help sell a lot of opioids and did keep Enron going for a while.
Yes, they're very good at their job. I mean, I think they also, I remember they came up during the 2020 primaries when Pete Buttigieg, one of the Democratic candidates, was being criticized for his role working for McKinsey. And the New York Times even called him out for this in like one of those, those video interviews they did with all the candidates of like their involvement in a bread fixing scandal in Canada. Like, again, these are like McKinsey is a really, again, like you said, very good at their job doing very bad things, like really helping shape the conversation around really nasty stuff, really horrible stuff. And so, just that really stuck out to me. And I guess it sort of puts some things into perspective, really, who's in this company and what they, and what we're dealing with here, I guess.
I mean, it also, I think to me, what I thought about was it also says a lot about the like quote unquote punk rock image of this company. You know what I mean? It's like we're renegades. Also,
like anti-punk rock.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
Oh, that is one of the things that really personally got at me, and we should get into him now because we really, I mean, was there anything that I missed that we should mention about CEO Nicole Muniz? I know we mentioned her video when they got doxxed, which is still one of the most incredible things I've ever seen, and her background in helping them early on, which I guess I never really knew how integral she was from those early days. I was assuming, being that she was the CEO, she came on much later when there was actually a company formed.
No, like I think I think what we can say is like she's a really good strategist. She's a very savvy marketer. I think she maybe underestimated, like everyone else in that company, how much they needed to get out ahead of their story. I think for a long time she was so focused on product, and I think now she almost sees her job as like changing some kind of perception around it because they've let a narrative grow for so long that it's like, you know what I mean? I went to brunch the other day with a friend and I was telling her about the story and she was like, oh, the like Nazi stuff? And I was like, yeah, that narrative has really taken hold. She doesn't work in the tech industry. She doesn't know anything about Bored Apes. But I guess what I would say is I think she's good at strategy. She helped figure out, new product drops. And I think she's been there since the beginning. She's been like helping figure this out since the beginning.
Right. So let's move on from her, at least for now. Maybe she'll come up again. But we got to get into him because I think if you're going to take away one thing from, I urge everyone to go check out this story. We're just touching the surface about what's in here. Like, these are just like, not even half of what's in this report. But to me, if there's one thing you do take out of this report, there's one takeaway. It is the involvement of Guy Oseary. For people who don't know, why don't you two explain who is Guy Oseary?
So Guy Oseary is hands down my favorite character in this piece. He's Guy's a guy who sort of made his name as a music manager initially. So he became, he was Madonna's manager. He's managed U2. He's managed Red Hot Chili Peppers. And he sort of came up as this like wheeler and dealer in the music industry, like this guy who made things happen. He also in his youth looked remarkably like Ali G, which I think is really funny. But as he became more successful, he also dipped into some other things. So he was a movie producer. He produced all the Twilight movies. And he has also invested in a lot of companies with his investing partner, or like he's a partner in a firm called Sound Ventures. Ashton Kutcher is also a partner there. They've invested in things from Airbnb to WeWork. So he is heavily involved in the startup scene. And he's been a big... It's funny because it's almost like a flywheel. Like he's been a fan and supporter, but also kind of the engine behind a lot of NFT related businesses and projects. So Sound Ventures and, by extension him, are investors in OpenSea, which is a platform through which a lot of Bored Apes are sold on. They're investors in MoonPay, which is a concierge service to help you buy an NFT. And they're also investors in Yuga Labs. And he has helped, I think, he is one of the big reasons why a lot of celebrities are so invested in the NFT space, in Yuga Labs related NFTs.
Right. Yeah. So this was the most incredible thing. Like, I did not realize how early on, again, he was, what is his role in Yuga Labs now? Like, he's an official part of Yuga Labs. He's not just like some.
Yeah, he's a partner.
And so this was announced though in like late, like I want to say fall 2001, like maybe like October last year. But he actually, what was that?
I think you said 2001.
Did I say 2001? Wow. 2021. Man, NFTs go much further back than I thought.
No, I was like, oh no, we're going to mislead some listeners here.
Right. Yeah. Oh, thank you for that correction. 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And, but from your piece, I sort of did not realize that he actually came on board and got involved with them and was working with them literally just like, what was it, like 2 months after the original Bored Ape Yacht Club launched in May. I mean, and from your piece, he seemed to have played, like you said, with the celebrities, but also played a big role in like a lot of the press they were receiving. Like, where else did he help that early on before he officially came on board?
I mean, he made a Bored Ape Yacht Club Rolling Stone cover happen. Like we asked him, or by his account, he did, like, I don't want to take away agency from editors and writers there. This isn't like a sort of weird publication battle. But, we asked him about it. We were like, how did that come about? And he was like, oh, I called him up and said we should do it. And I think that's kind of how it works. And I don't know if you remember, there was a fairly widely panned Jimmy Fallon interview where Jimmy Fallon and Paris Hilton both talked about the Bored Apes they owned and how they paid for them. And they paid for them through MoonPay, which is one of Guy Oseary's companies. And I don't know if it's fair to say he engineered it, but I think it's fair to say that he's an investor in MoonPay, he's an investor in Yuga Labs, and he knows Jimmy Fallon and Paris Hilton probably. You know what I mean? Like,
I'll say it. He engineered it.
Guy Oseary also had a huge part, I think, in making the first Ape Fest, which happened, I think, in like late October, early November last year. which I think they had dreamt up initially as like, oh, let's just get all the NFT like Bored Ape holders together, and it was just going to be like the people from the Discord meeting in real life, and I don't know, standing around and eating crackers and talking. But then Guy Oseary came in, you know, and then he like brought in like Chris Rock and like the Smiths and like all of these artists and like
he didn't bring in the Smiths.
Oh my gosh, who was it? It's like another band that's a lot like the Smiths.
He did call Morrissey during our interview, or he received a phone call from Morrissey, which was really funny.
That's why I'm conflating them. No, but like there was a band that like, oh, what was the band? Okay, whatever. Like there were a lot of like big name artists at
I mean, he had to have played a role in just at this past MTV Awards where Eminem and Snoop Dogg transformed into their Bored Ape NFTs, which again was roundly knocked and criticized online because average people do not care about this. It's like, again, like I don't think people really understand, like we're Bored Ape Yacht Club, all this money, multi-billion-dollar company. In total, when you count all the sales and everything, only 11,000 people, or wallets, I should say, have ever held a Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT. If a social network had 11,000 users, they would not be able to raise whatever money, the hundreds of millions of dollars they raised to be valued at billions of dollars. It is like a bubble.
I guess the argument, it is like a bubble, but it's also like the argument they make is that only 11,000 people have them, so it's really exclusive, so therefore it's desirable to a much higher number of people. And if like even a small percentage of those 11,000 people develop successful products or projects around their apes, you know, that number of people who want a Bored Ape will only grow. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like the idea that by keeping it small and exclusive, you almost make it like something people are more interested in or find more mysterious or more cool. I don't know if that's true. Like, I don't know if that thesis is true, but I think that's where they're going with it. And I think that's probably what investors are excited about.
I think the exclusivity is really a big part of the appeal for a lot of people. And, you know, when you talk about NFT culture, like having your profile picture on Twitter matters a lot, right? And having a Bored Ape as your profile picture is like a big flex. And, you know, I think like, you know, getting into Ape Fest is like it's like a big deal. Like it's very exclusive. Like you can only go if you own the NFT, and like, you know, the QR code to get in, like it just like, it's like morphing. The pixels are all moving around so that you can't even screenshot it. They're just like taking a lot of steps to like prevent, you know, to keep the exclusivity very, very strong.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess,
mean,
you know,
yeah. I guess it is just like a big exclusive club. I'm sorry, what? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They're banking on it staying cool, and they're banking on it staying exclusive. Like, who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I guess we'll see how far the, you know, that audience accepts this into whatever it is, and we'll get into an audience that does not accept this in a second. But I wanted to mention, you mentioned that Paris Hilton Jimmy Fallon interview on the Tonight Show on NBC, which still I'm shocked that hasn't flagged any sort of investigation from like the SEC or even like the FTC or whatever. Just very weird that they were openly promoting Bored Apes on this, because again, this isn't a product or a service. If you buy something from a company that sells a product or service, the transaction ends right there. You pay them money, they're happy. You get the product or service, you're happy. End of the deal, end of the transaction. But with these are, like you mentioned earlier, securities. These are highly volatile investments. They are speculative assets, and people are putting a lot of their money into this. And there are rules and regulations around those things. And I mean, Kim Kardashian was just hit with a multi-million-dollar fine from the SEC for promoting a shady token, an unregistered security, without proper, without
Ethereum
proper disclosure. Yeah. What was it called again? Ethereum Max, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really, there's a failing on the regulators here too for not putting a stop or creating better rules around this stuff. But speaking of that, Paris Hilton and Jimmy Fallon, to get back on track, one thing that really struck me, again, that sort of, I guess, speaks into either Guy Osiery's involvement or CEO Nicole Muniz's involvement with her background, or maybe both of them come together to combine into some, like, I don't know, Super Saiyan NFT promoter. But early in your piece, when you ask Gordon Goner, why are people buying these Bored Apes? Like, what do you think is the selling point for them? Like, why is this the project that took off? And he says something to the effect of, oh, people were just able to find apes that spoke to their personality. And as I'm reading that, I had a deja vu, because I've watched this clip probably more times than anyone else. I could probably reach out to Guinness and get in the world record book there, because this clip angers me so much. I've played it many times before. But
specific. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I went back to watching that clip, and it's literally the same thing Jimmy Fallon and Paris Hilton say. I mean, not perfectly verbatim, but it's like the same marketing mumbo jumbo where they're like, oh, I was looking at all the apes and I found one that spoke to me, fit me and who I am. And it's like, nobody thinks this way about these things. I'm sorry. This is like the people who are spending this money on these are just looking for like the rare one that they think is gonna, they'll be able to flip for more money. Like, that's the real reason people are buying these things. Like, no one is buying them for this reason. And it sounded a lot like to me, like a marketing lingo that like was like thought up, and they passed it around to all the celebrities who they procured a Bored Ape for. And they were like, this is what you say when you're asked, oh, why this Bored Ape?
I mean, we don't know,
right?
Like, all we can say is like they're similar. Like you did, I think what you pointed out feels right. Is a good observation. But yeah. I mean, I think it's stuff like that I think makes people feel suspicious about this company.
Right. And so, we were talking about like, all the different, you were mentioning, Yaz, all the different cookie jars that Guy Oseary had his hands in. And it's almost like, I remember early in I think it was like earlier this year, I saw Max Reed, a writer. He has a newsletter, and I think he used to write for Gawker back when, before Gawker was shut down. Yeah, it's a good newsletter too. And he early on had this great like chart that showed all the different connections between various celebrities and different, NFT projects and NFT promoters and NFT businesses to show, how connected they all are. And, when I look at how you laid out in your piece all the different connections Guy Oseary has to all of this, it's like, and there's this line in here again. I think this is like everything about him is everyone needs to read this piece to just read the Oseary stuff. There's this line in there where you do ask him about, you're on every side of this transaction, and then the promotion of the apes involved in those transactions. And you asked whether that conflict was ethical, and you write that he's bewildered. He says he's just trying to help people. It's in his nature. And I mean, I probably stopped when reading at that point, and I laughed because it's bullshit. It's bullshit. Who is he helping? He's not helping anybody. He's helping celebrities buy all the NFT projects that he just so happens to be invested in. I mean, why? So then those celebrities can hype those NFT projects to their fans and followers, and then his NFT projects make even more money. And like, to really drive home, let's go through this all. So you mentioned that Guy Oseary is involved in Sound Ventures, right? That's his his startup investment, his VC firm. And so he's got that going. And then he's got investment in different startups. One of such, like you mentioned, OpenSea. All these Bored Apes are sold on OpenSea. He works for Yuga Labs, the parent company of Bored Ape Yacht Club. So he's double dipping there.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, don't forget, when they sell on OpenSea, money gets kicked back to Yuga Labs as well. On top of that, he's invested in MoonPay, which is a concierge service to help acquire these NFTs for celebrities, because again, this whole process is so stupidly overcomplicated that celebrities and regular people can't do it themselves in some cases. So he's getting extra money there by creating a paid service called MoonPay, where it buys these NFTs for celebrities. So there's another kickback for him. And again, he's buying NFTs that he is involved in, another kickback there. And then in your piece, he's telling you guys that you should somehow, Fast Company should use the service BitPay to accept ApeCoin, which is available to pay with on BitPay. And he's invested in BitPay, and ApeCoin is the crypto token adjacent, we'll get into that in a second, cryptocurrency that's run yet technically not run by Yuga Labs. And he's involved in that. And then when you look at the foundation, the Ape Foundation that runs, that like basically, we'll get more into ApeCoin in a second, but the foundation that helps run the ApeCoin, there are people sitting on that board who are partners at Sound Ventures. Guy Oseary's freaking VC firm. I mean, I'm running out of breath. I can't, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I will say, when you mention ApeCoin, I think, the distribution of ApeCoin is probably one of the biggest questions that like crypto skeptics have had about Yuga Labs. Because like you mentioned, the token structure, well, I guess we'll have to get into like how DAO works and how the ApeCoin structure works, which maybe we should save that for later. Should we save that for later?
You know what, let's get into ApeCoin now. So what is ApeCoin? Well, let's go there. Let's get this so people really understand the sticky fingers that Guy Oseary has here. What is ApeCoin?
Well, so ApeCoin is sort of the token that was started to be like the main currency in Otherside, which is Yuga Labs metaverse that is coming out sometime in the future. So everything that you buy and sell in the metaverse is going to be done in ApeCoin. I guess it's not technically run by Yuga Labs. It was piloted by this organization called ApeCoin DAO, which in theory means that the currency is governed by the community members, because the way DAOs work, like people who own the token, I guess, holders, stakeholders, use the tokens to vote on proposals within the DAO. So, more tokens, more voting power. So this sort of raised a lot of eyebrows with ApeCoin, because when it launched in March, like there was this massive airdrop of like 1 billion tokens. And, that same month there was a report in Bloomberg that said that 14% of those tokens went to ApeCoin's launch partners, which are basically investors like A16Z and Animoca Brands. And then, 15% went to Yuga Labs itself, and 8% went to the founders. So that's a total of 37%. And then meanwhile, like 15% in total went to Bored Ape and Mutant Ape holders. So I think like that sort of like when we talk to a lot of people who were sort of affected by this like token structure, and we spoke to, A16Z, we spoke to Chris Dixon, and none of them really had a great answer for like how you reconcile this sort of token structure with the crypto libertarian philosophy, right? Like when we spoke to Chris, he was like, I mean, he actually weirdly was like, oh, A16Z doesn't have any ApeCoin, which I don't know, didn't like left a lot of other questions, but you know, not a great answer from him. And then I spoke to Yatsu, who is the CEO of Animoca Brands and also a board member of on the ApeCoin DAO. And his sort of like justification was like, oh, well, Animoca hasn't used its tokens to vote, like at all. You know, like we have the tokens, but we just haven't used them. And even proposals that we have put forth have been defeated. And so that was like sort of like how he explained away the problematic structure, which I don't think is an answer that's going to satisfy a lot of people. And then, yeah, when we asked Guy Oseary about the structure, he was like really irritated. You know, he was just like not having it. He was like, I'm not going to answer that question. And like, you know, I just, you know, I could walk you through it, but I don't have time. He just like, we just didn't get a great answer from anybody about like how you reconcile this structure. So that I think that was something that really stood out to us when we were.
Yeah, again, a lot of times they're non-answers to this stuff. Like the gaps in your piece told me so much. Like, first of all, Chris Dixon, amazingly thin-skinned. Anyone criticizes any one of his NFT projects, I'm blocked by him on Twitter for, I think, daring to ask a question about the setup of something. I don't remember what it was even. But, you know, I think any critic in this space has been blocked. Every critic in the space has been blocked by Chris Dixon.
We really enjoyed whenever because we have an online transcription service, and whenever they transcribe the name Chris Dixon, they transcribed it as Christ Dixon.
Like when we spoke to Nicole too, she was like, you know, as I was guiding like Gordon and Garga through this whole process, early on, you know, people were starting to come to them when they were starting to have success, like, you know, VCs were starting to come. And Nicole was like, I told them, it doesn't matter who it is if it's not A16Z. Like, hold out for A16Z. Like, they're the end all be all. Like, nobody else matters. And so it was funny.
Who told you
like,
this?
Nicole.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
Right,
that was what he was telling Gordon and Garga at the time. And so we just thought it was funny because then he became Christ Dixon in our transcripts.
Yeah.
Like, so like that just
they are the big Web3 NFT crypto VC firm, and they are behind a lot of projects that have hurt a lot of regular people big time, while they've just enriched themselves further. I mean, Mark Andreessen's been buying multi-million-dollar home after multi-million-dollar home. I mean, Guy Oseary not wanting to even talk about this, getting irritated about it as he's, you know, sticking his head in every which way to find new ways to scrounge money out of the average person by selling them this stuff.
About Guy, which I think a lot. Something that I really liked about interviewing him is that he doesn't lie to you. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, you'll be like, why is your hand in all these things? And he's like, because it is. like, you know what I mean? He doesn't try and like justify anything.
That's
he's
the
just
only
like,
way I know how to do business.
That's how I work. That's how I work.
Right. So he's proud of being unethical and, you know, doing this stuff. Wonderful. Right. Wonderful. I mean, you know, the part that really bothered me on a personal level in this piece, and I mean, Bored Ape Yacht Club really tried to promote themselves as like being, and you've mentioned it too, like, you know, this punk rock brand or whatever, and how was it Gordon Goner, you know, sparked a relationship with Guy Oseary over their love of Bad Brains. Yeah. And I know Guy Oseary was involved in like signing them to his label that's now defunct back in like the 90s or whatever. And it was a bad time for Bad Brains, so it didn't work out or whatever. But nothing about this is punk. Like nothing about this is like real. And like, you know, there are punk bands who got successful without selling out. And this is like, this whole thing is like, to me, it's like, the ultimate selling out. Like the way they went from, first of all, I think the whole idea of crypto, NFTs included, just is the very worst of capitalism, which right away writes out any ability for it to be punk. But then you got obviously the punk aesthetic that they enjoy, that you could see in some of the Bored Ape Yacht Club, and like the art in general, but then in some of their outfits and stuff. And the idea behind it, of it being like people can, they own their ape, I could see how that can be in their twisted logic, a little punk or whatever. But then their future projects don't have that, where you don't own the IP if you have the NFT. And then they go ahead and literally decide and hold out for, from what you found out, hold out for what, in my estimation, is the worst of the VCs. In terms of like simply ethics and their politics and their ideology and how they view the world. And then they take all this money and they decide to, and we'll talk a little bit more about ApeCoin in a second. You already ran through some of the basics there, but there's much more to talk about there. And they go into ApeCoin, which, like you laid out, is very sketchy. It's not democratizing at all. They gave huge swaths of this token that was supposed to be spread apart equally to everyone who owns a Bored Ape Yacht Club, and then further down spread apart between the people who own the mutant apes, and then further down spread, continuing down the line, so everybody's getting some. But they save this huge portion for themselves, their investors, the people who are already very rich off of all this. And it's just like, man, like, if there's anything that is not punk, it's this. Like, I'm not going to be the gatekeeper of punk rock, but I mean, Joe Strummer is not going to come back to, come out of the grave with Joey Ramone and be like, we're going to get ourselves some Bored Ape Yacht Club NFTs. I mean, this is just not what that was about. And I just went on a rant. I'm sorry. It's very personal to me as someone who came up in that, in that world. So just, it really, I just, from that standpoint. But let's get back to ApeCoin. This is what has gotten them in trouble with the SEC, correct? Like, this is why the SEC is now actually finally looking into their activities, specifically because of the way they set up the ApeCoin, where they're claiming that Yuga Labs does not run the ApeCoin. It's run by the DAO, which votes on, the different rules or whatever, or things to do as, a collective. But it just so happens that you vote in a DAO based on how many tokens you have, and they've distributed the majority of the tokens to themselves and their investors. And then B, the foundation that then carries out what the DAO votes for is filled with people like someone from Guy Oseary Sound Ventures. And then you had mentioned, what is it? Animoca?
Animoca.
Yeah.
Animoca, right. Animoca Brands. The person you spoke with, they're also, I looked into it, they're also on the Ape Foundation board. I mean, the thing, I think I've said this word already, but it's just so incestual. It's like ridiculous. It's like nothing is further from like the idea of crypto is going to reinvent the banking system to make it more equal and equitable for everybody. This is worse than the old finance system, if you ask me, because there's not even any regulatory body. Well, finally the SEC, but before that, and who knows what little they'll do. I mean, we already saw the slap on the wrist they gave Kim Kardashian. There's no regulatory body to do anything about this.
It is funny, when we were reporting it, I started to think of myself as like, in movies when like somebody has all the strings on the wall and they're like finding the connections. And that's kind of what like this felt like we were like tracking down a serial killer or something. Just because like you start, and it's easy to get conspiracy brain from all this. And by that I mean, I'm not saying that the connections and conspiracies don't exist, but like you have to sit there and say, like, what do I believe in? And like, say for me, like the Ryder Ripp stuff, I was like, I don't really think so. This other stuff, maybe. And I think that's why it's the subject of so much speculation and controversy, because there is this element of like, where did this come from 18 months ago? It didn't exist. And like, there's all these people who have connections everywhere. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And I think that idea of sort of connecting the dots is how we even got to Guy Oseary, because we had started talking to a lot of people, and, you know, like I spoke to like Herman Narula, who, you know, is his company Improbable is sort of the engineering firm behind Otherside, which we haven't talked about yet. But when I spoke to him, he said he was connected through Guy Oseary. And then, you know, then I spoke to Yatsu, and he also was connected to, you know, Yuga Labs through Guy Oseary. And it sort of became this theme that like whoever we spoke to, they got in touch with Yuga Labs through Guy Oseary, and you're like, oh, there's something here, you know, like he's the connection. Yeah.
Right. Like I get it's a small world, but this is not like, you know, you'll find partnerships in other industries, but nothing like this. Like there's nothing you'll find where the same guy is behind, you know, the pre-production, then the you know, the factory that creates the product, and then the company that designs the marketing, and then the company that designs the boxes, and then the distribution company. Like you won't find, again, there's partnerships, you're not gonna find the same characters behind each. And this is that. Like, this is exactly what you said. The like, again, for any other thing, I would be like, well, we're getting conspiratorial here. But like you said, it's all right in front of you. Like, they're even like openly flaunting it as like, I feel like it's almost like, what you gonna do about it? Like, you know, there's no one to stop them, because they're in uncharted waters. I mean, there's nothing that came before that sort of set the standards for, you know, a regulatory body to do something until now. Let's get into there's only a few more things to talk about. And we talked about so much, and still, again, so much more. But let's talk about just a few more. Otherside, you mentioned. And in your piece, it seemed like, Connie, it seemed like you went into the Otherside metaverse, and this was something that you sort of thought was well done.
Yeah. So I went on, I guess, what was called the first trip, which is like the first demo of their metaverse, Otherside, in mid-July. And so Otherside hasn't come out yet. It's being promised, it's being hyped, but it doesn't exist yet. But, you know, I think the first trip was, by all means, I think, a big success for Yuga. You know, I would call it a win for them. Like, people were raving about it on Twitter. I had fun. I'm not a gamer whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned I spoke to the CEO of the company that engineered the whole thing. So, you know, of course he's going to talk up his own product, but he said that, you know, Otherside had like 50 times the operational capacity of Fortnite or something, just in terms of like people that it could house in one place. And so I think it was technically impressive. And, you know, they had like put a lot of effort into designing a fun experience. You know, there's like a quest, there was an MC who was like very irreverent, which is like very like it true to, you know, BAYC form. He was like swearing, and he lists all nerds and, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it was a fun experience. I think it was probably definitely like one of Yuga's high points in the last year, in the last half year. Yeah.
And I think, to take a step back, Connie, do you want to talk a little bit about how Otherside came to be, or like the genesis of these gaming operations or these gaming ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of came from, you know, Gordon and Garga being gamers growing up, and now I feel like they're like, well, now we have this company, and what do we like do with it? Let's make it a game. But yeah, I don't know if there's like more Yaz that you wanted to add.
No, that's basically it. I think it's interesting that, there's this company, it's valued at $4 billion. The question is, what are they going to do next? And like, when we talk to Guy Oseary, like, doesn't seem like a man who's interested in gaming, but I think like the two co-founders are like, well, I guess we should just do what we've always wanted to do, like do the thing that we...
Does it feel like to me it sort of feels like they the promise of a utility for this stuff. That's what we always hear too in this space. Like, a project with utility, and you look up what the utility is, and it's
Like
drawing
what?
drawing a dick on a digital bathroom stall wall, like you said earlier. Like that was their original idea for like why people would want to buy a Bored Apes. They get access to this digital bathroom stall to graffiti on. That's not utility. But that's the sort of thing they come up with. I mean, I guess utility is the access to the real world events. But what? That comes around once, maybe twice a year. What do you do with your Bored Ape around the clock, like for the rest of the year? And so I feel like the most obvious thing for a lot of these NFT projects is to make a video game, because again, that's sort of the world they grew up in and came out of.
But gamers hate it.
Gamers hate it. Yeah.
I think the like, when you mention utility, I think that's just a really interesting, point to touch upon. I think like when you look at like Yuga's sort of business model as a whole, right? So much of it rests on utility and the idea that like people are actually going to take these things, like take these Bored Ape characters and like build, burger restaurants and like comic books and, write novels around them. And, that they're going to go into Otherside and play this game because it's a fun game, So it like a lot of it just really revolves around the idea of utility, and not just like using the things, but like going in and like building as well. But like when you look at like the NFT holders who own these Bored Apes, like it's more of an open question of like how do they view it? Like,
yeah,
I think there's like there's a schism, I think, in crypto as a whole, where like you have like the true believers that like see crypto, ideologically as like it's a very like utopian thing, right? If you talk about what it could do in a perfect world, bank the unbanked, like take power from corrupt governments and put it in the hands of the people. So it's just philosophically very idealistic. But then, come back to reality and look at like who's building in the space. And right now, it looks like a lot of people who you would call, part of the economic elite, or it's like people who have means and they're treating these things as like investments that they're gonna like rise in value and then just be sold off later. So yeah, it's like, what does that mean? Like, are people like, yes, like MAYC sold out in like a day, like other deeds, the land NFTs for Otherside sold out in like minutes, but like are people scrambling for these assets because they're so excited to go into Otherside and build in this world and like create like novels around their Bored Apes, or are they doing it just because they think it's going to make them a lot of money? They're going to get their cash and get out, so, and that's going to be really important, I think, for the future of Yuga Labs, right? Like who's buying their NFTs? Are they like true believers? Are they speculators? And I don't know, it's hard to say right now.
Yeah, we'll see.
How did you get into, because you need one of these NFTs to actually even get into the metaverse of Otherside. What was your way of accessing it?
Yeah, so I do not own any Yuga properties. But I knew somebody who did have an other deed. So you needed an other deed, which is the land NFT to get into the first trip. So I knew someone who had it, and then he didn't want to play the game, which, I don't know if that's like telling in a way, but he just wasn't interested. And so he's like, you can have it. And I was happy to take it. I was like, oh yeah, like works well for me.
I mean, that sort of answers that question. You already have one person who bought it, spent, I'm assuming, a decent chunk of change on it, and had no interest at all in partaking in The utility of it. I mean,
And if at this point Connie was like, I'm Guy Osiery's daughter.
But yeah, no, I think that, like, 4,000 people went on the first trip, and they all had to own the NFT. So I think in some way they were all already part of the BAYC community, and they had already sort of bought in, right? But I feel like the business model for Otherside rests on the idea that it's going to be, well, the pitch you hear is that it's going to be an interoperable metaverse, which means that it's not just for the BAYC community. Like, you can bring in avatars from like any other NFT collection, like Moonbirds or Doodles or like World of Women or whatever. Like, you can bring that into the world, and sort of then that's how they're going to appeal to this broader crowd. But yeah, I think it's like, and I was talking to a blockchain gaming consultant, and his name is Lars Doucette. But I think he like put it to me this way. He was like, well, how is that model going to work? Because like the idea and the big pitch of like Web3 is that it's all open source and you can come in and build. And so like, like presumably people would come into Otherside and build their own modules in the world, like their own castles or like quests or, design experiences that are going to enrich it for the rest of the community. But like what is kind of interesting about Otherside is that you can buy a land NFT and then not build anything, and it could still go up in value, right? Like, because you could just wait for your neighbors to come in and build next to you, and then the value of your NFT will go up, and then you can just sell it off or do whatever you want with it. So in that sense, it kind of begs the question, like, who are you bringing in? Like, are you going to appeal to like the people with the most creative energy and like the most desire to build, or are you just going to like bring in a lot of people who want to profit off of those people with creative energy? So it's kind of like an interesting question. And yeah, is it just going to be more speculators?
Yeah, I gotta say, Connie, it sounded like you were describing not a video gaming, but it sounded like you were describing like real estate investments. Like there's that's not gaming. And again, like we've seen the NFT space sort of focus, not just even Bored Ape Yacht Club, focus on gaming being the future. I mean, they even say to you in the piece that the future of NFTs is in gaming, and gamers will end up liking it eventually. Like they're so sure of it. Yet there's been no movement on this front. Every NFT game has been a bust. The one game that was gaining a little traction, Axie Infinity, also failed in a spectacular fashion after they were hacked due to their own problems with their own issues. Like, they were responsible for what they left out in the open when they were hacked. And what happened? The people who were playing the game got screwed over, because to play these games, you actually have to invest a chunk of change into it to own an NFT, to be able to enter these worlds. So, I mean, could Bored Ape Yacht Club be the first to find out how to do it correct in that space? Who knows, I guess, but the history does not look kindly upon what they're trying to do here, and it doesn't seem like they sort of are on the right track either in terms of the whole gaming part of this doesn't seem to be really focused on in the equation, if it's there at all.
And I think it's also just hard to design a really fun game. Like that's a challenge that I hear like a lot of gamers talk about,
They do have a couple $100 million to go ahead and hire actual game developers. But yeah, no, it absolutely is true that like that's the big challenge. You need to you can't just create a game and think it's going to be easy. A lot of these gaming companies are legacy companies that have been around for a long time because they know how to do it. It's very hard story-wise and then development-wise. Like I couldn't even begin to imagine what goes into a video game. I do know that it takes years for some of these games to actually finally come out.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So let's move on to just a few more things now. Did the scamming stuff ever come up with Yuga Labs? Like, did you bring up? I'm pretty sure you did in the piece, but did they say anything about why scams are so prevalent? Like, it feels like almost every other day you hear it about. It's that meme now where it's like, oh, someone stole my ape. Almost every other day, someone is losing something they spent 6 figures on. Do they worry about this?
I would say they definitely worry about it. We brought it up a bunch, and they sort of expressed concern over the issue. I think the problem is it feels like they don't totally know what to do about it, right? Like, I guess if you were thinking of, and this is not a great comparison, but if you thought of NFTs as like, if it was like buying a physical painting, if you bought a physical painting from a gallery and then it got stolen from your home, is the gallery responsible? Like, it's actually kind of hard to make that case. That doesn't, I'm not sitting here saying Yuga shouldn't do anything about it, but like, that is one way of looking at it. And it also shows kind of the difficult situation they find themselves in with these things. And the other issue is, I think, well, there's a couple. The first is like, it's a pretty nascent industry that is like very underregulated, right? So that's just hard. There's fewer guardrails. Like, the crypto police doesn't totally exist. I profiled a company a while ago called Chainalysis that basically like analyzes blockchain interactions to figure out, the deal with thefts. They work with governments. Like, they're really trying to make sure that people are protecting their assets. And when I was writing that piece, I actually encountered a lot of opposition to the company from crypto enthusiasts who were basically saying like, no, like, we don't want any kind of regulation. And to me, I was like, wow, there's this real ideological tension that means that it's like no one wants to get scammed, but also no one wants any kind of like policing. So like, where does that leave you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Yes. They want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be able to get away with the positives of doing business in the wild, wild west, but they don't want to deal with any of the negatives of getting in with the mafia.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird because to me, like, all right, I get, you can't. Yuga Labs can't be responsible for every sort of individual who buys a Bored Ape and is lackadaisical, I guess, with like maybe their crypto wallet password security or whatever. But there's also
things where you legit like, like people make their profile pictures their Bored Apes because they want to flex, but then like a hacker will know exactly who to target. You know what I mean? In a way that
yeah.
If you bought something really expensive and it was in your home, you wouldn't necessarily, like, not everybody would know that about you. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I do think they bear some responsibility for there were a few times where people lost their apes because of hacks and scams within Yuga Labs' own Discord community, which to me is sort of on them. So I think at least they should get more serious about that. I don't know, maybe they have worked with those parties who lost their NFTs then. But I think their hands-off approach on this is weird. It's, like even big platforms, they proactively work on taking down like phishing websites and stuff because they don't want to see their consumer base get screwed over. And so it's weird that they seem to not want to take any responsibility there.
Well, it does. I don't know that they don't want to take any responsibility, but it does feel like something that they're struggling with at the moment. Like it's not something that they're just like, we don't care. Like, this is not our thing. I just don't think they know the solution to the problem. And there's a few instances like, they're currently suing artist Ryder Ripp over, the fact that once he made all these accusations against the company of having, kind of controversial images or, like espousing some kind of Nazi ideology, he released his own collection of NFTs that are like very similar to the Bored Apes. And I think some people got duped and bought them thinking they were buying a Bored Ape. You know what I mean? Like, I think that affected consumers, the company has been trying to take action on that. So
Right.
it's like
let's get into the Ryder Ripp thing. Let's talk about him. Because I saw this this piece he put together. You had mentioned it early on, where it's sort of what has forced them to come out, or at least it was the starting of them wanting to come out and try to own their own narrative and reach out to Fast Company and speak with you two, for example. And that was this artist, Ryder Ripp, was leveling these accusations that Bored Ape Yacht Club had tons of racist imagery. And if you look at it, I didn't cover it when it came out. I've only spoken about it in terms of like it being part of the Bored Ape story, because there are some points throughout that you look at the case that Ryder Ripp is making and you say, I see this. I mean, clearly this ape's outfit is at the very least in bad taste, and in certain cases are certainly using racist imagery. So it does make you wonder, but there were some jumps there that I thought was taking the accusations too far. Like, there is a difference between someone sort of
like getting something wrong, making a joke in poor taste that is bad, like it's bad, like no one's saying it's not, and somebody being like, you know what, I want to like promote a racist ideology or whatever, and infiltrate the masses with that, right? There's the aspect of like, is there a master plan, or did they just fuck up, like, you know?
Right. Yes. So I think there were a number of jumps there, and I don't think the case was made well. And to me, the biggest turnoff, what I think completely ruined his credibility in this argument. Again, I don't know Ryder Ripp's and his overall credibility, but what hurt his credibility in making this argument was the fact that he used it as a promotional vehicle for his own NFT project. I mean, if he really cared about making this argument and spreading awareness about the possible white supremacist or neo-Nazi connections of the Bored Ape Yacht Club and Yuga Labs, it probably was not in his best interest to try to monetize it for personal gain. So, I do think it opened up a conversation, and I've seen that there are people who are looking further into this, and I don't think anything is really too concrete yet to talk about on this show, but I have seen people like Frederick Brennan, who is the founder of 8chan, who has done a complete 180 in recent years, basically making it his life's mission to take down 8chan, this super racist, white supremacist image board where QAnon conspiracy theories live and fester and spread. And he's looking into things, and I think he's on something. And again, nothing too concrete to bring up yet, but it did open up a conversation. But at the same time, I don't think there's anything that's in Ryder Ripp's work that seals the deal for me. And this is, if you're in Yuga Labs and you're listening to this right now, it might surprise you that I have this take, but I'm fair, and I don't think there's anything here yet. And that's why it's important that these guys were doxed. I don't even consider this to be doxing, because if there is anything out there, then people should know about it. And if there's nothing, that's great. Go on and do your thing. And if there is, people will eventually find it.
Yeah, I will say, we sort of came to the same conclusion. We really went into reporting this without having any preconceived, when I started writing this article, Connie has been in the world for longer than I have, but I was really like, you know what? This is the story of a company that achieved a $4 billion valuation in 18 months. That's all I know. That's what I'm going in with. I will investigate every claim made against them. And I can say with good faith, I didn't see anything that totally sealed the deal. That's not to say they're, absolutely, you know what I mean? Some researcher may come out with something that convinces me otherwise, but like we really did look into this.
Right. Like I have another show. Like my background is in, covering the right. And this would have been a topic on there focusing on the connections to right wing figures and people that these people would have had or might have. But it hasn't got there for me. If it comes out, I am looking into things myself. It should be covered, and that's when we can, substantially say that these things exist. But until then, it's just a part of the Bored Ape Yacht Club story, and it's not anything further than that yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so,
also,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, not to derail us, but I just randomly thought of the fact that I actually met someone at Ape Fest who had their ape stolen in a hack.
Really? What did they say? Did they get it back? How'd they get into Ape Fest?
Casual. Yeah, he had like shown up to the party and he was just glad that he got in because he was like, oh, he was like, I thought there might be an issue because I don't have my ape anymore. But he was like, yeah, they let me in. He was like, I just talked to those guys over there. They said they're going to help me get my ape back. I don't know. He was just partying. I feel
like I'd be so salty if somebody stole my ape. I'd be like, I'm not coming to this party. But that's just me. Maybe that's just like me being a jerk.
I mean, again, that's like the point, though. The flipping of the value is in that NFT. Who cares about the party? But I guess this guy did. He really appreciated the access to an exclusive party.
I did kind of get the sense because it was interesting when I was there. It was like right after the second crypto crash. Like there was the Terra Luna collapse first, and then there was like the Celsius whole like implosion. And that happened in early June, and then Ape Fest was like in late June. And so like there was this like overcast sort of like, it was a very gloomy climate for crypto when I showed up to this Ape Fest party. But I kind of got the sense that like a lot of people there didn't seem like they were in a financial position where they were too worried about like, they didn't seem like the people who like lost their like retirement and college funds like on like Terra Luna, and like they seemed like people who could probably take the hit and keep going. It's like a bummer like that investment didn't work out, but like anyway, like it's kind of a side note. But
something that I love that you were telling me about was the kind of relentless hustle culture at Ape Fest. And sorry, after this I actually have to go.
Okay, no, yeah, that's fine. I've held you guys for this. Has been a long episode. I really appreciate you taking the time.
But Connie, I loved how you were talking about the fact that like, not only were people like not that financially worried, but also people had their own businesses they were promoting while they were there. You know what I mean? It's just this like really like interesting group of people.
Yeah, I mean it was like, Ape Fest was a party, right? It was like meant to be a celebration of like BAYC's success, and it was a rap concert, right? Like when I was there, Lil Wayne was like opening for Eminem and Snoop Dogg, and I think that like it was very much a celebration, but there's also just this hustle where it was like, Ape Fest took place at the same time as NFT NYC, which is sort of like the big Web3 conference in the city. And so a lot of people were also there for that and seemed like really focused on, promoting their own like Web3 startups and like projects or whatever. So you'd like be moving through the crowd, like, at the festival, and then people would be stopping you to like hand out stickers of, their own like, blockchain video game, or like join this DAO that we're buying historical artifacts, and like which there are literally like 3 DAOs now that are doing that, but they'd be just like giving you their pitch. It was like they were like trying to build the next BAYC,
right?
And I think it's just like I think it was just so emblematic of like the ethos of crypto where it is right now. It's just like hustle, like build, make money, strike it big, and like take that however you will. But like I feel like that's the community that kind of makes BAYC run. So I feel like they are going to be responsible for its future in some way.
Right.
So
yeah,
interesting.
They looked, it's monetize from what it sounds like. Use even the Bored Ape Yacht Club parties to push your thing, your project. This, again, this was a fantastic piece, and everyone should go check it out in Fast Company. And the one thing that we didn't get to that I wanted to quickly mention is the person who made a cameo in this that I was not expecting is Beeple. And it doesn't, obviously he sort of kicked off this whole big NFT run when his $69 million NFT sold at auction. But how that went down was also sketchy. I mean, Amy Castor's been really a great reporter on this whole Bored Apes and NFTs and the Beeple thing from the very beginning. And it turns out that Beeple had contacted the Bored Ape Yacht Club. In your report, you mentioned this in like July and connected them to Guy Oseary. And Beeple himself has a sort of shady past with how that $69 million deal went down, because the person who bought it actually bought it to kick off one of their other companies, metaverse, which basically put all these NFTs into a collection and let people buy fractional shares of these NFTs. And before he actually bought that Beeple NFT, he had given a number of these tokens that were the fractional shares to Beeple himself, which begs the question, how in cahoots were they before this auction ended? Which again, and then he gets involved with reaching out to Bored Apes, connecting them to Guy Oseary. It really, again, ties together the whole shadiness aspect and the way that all these people have their tentacles all over this. And I just wanted to mention that one last thing before I let you guys go, because it really, that was the cameo. That was if the Guy Oseary stuff is the most revealing, seeing Beeple come in as the one who put that together was like the cherry on top. Everyone, the link to the Fast Company piece is in the description on the YouTube video, in the podcast, on all the podcast platforms, on the website, scameconomy.com. Yasmin, Gagne, who, by the way, I found out that you're related to the legendary pro wrestler, and that was amazing to me. Connie Lin.
Mess with me.
Right.
Don't mess.
Right. I won't. You might mint me on the blockchain. Connie Lin, both of you a Fast Company. Where can people find you online? And feel free to use this opportunity to promote what's coming up or whatever you'd like. The floor is yours.
You can find me at Yasmin Gagne on Twitter. And you can find me at YazzyG on Instagram. And in terms of what I have to promote, I'm currently overseeing the biggest package in our December issue, which will be on newsstands in like a month. This story is in our November issue. It's our most productive people issue. Really different vibe, super fun. We talk to a lot of very cool people about their daily lives. So it's like a nice excuse to just be nosy and learn weird things about famous people. So definitely pick it up.
And my handle on Twitter is Connie JL, JAYELLE. It's just my initials spelled out. Also on Instagram, same handle. And I don't have anything to plug, but I write for Fast Company most days, and check out the website.
There we go. Thank you both so much for your time. Again, this is the longest episode of Scam Economy thus far. There's so much more in this piece that everyone should go read. Have a great night, Connie and Yaz. This was fantastic.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thanks for having us, Matt.
I hope you all enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed doing it. I mean, I got to thank, again, Yaz and Connie for taking the time. I'll take you a little bit behind the scenes of Scam Economy as well. This was the second time we recorded this episode. There was a technical issue with the first time we did this, and all of the sound didn't record. So I, again, can't thank them enough for not only taking the time to speak with me, but for doing it all again a second time. Now, you've already been listening to my voice long enough. You heard all the links I set up top. Usually you hear me go a little bit more into it here, but I'm just going to do quick mentions. Patreon.com/MattBinder, YouTube.com/MattBinder. Don't forget to connect your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, and you get a free Twitch Prime subscription every month, so that way you can subscribe to twitch.tv/MattBinder every single month that you'd like to, at no cost to you, just forcing Amazon to give me a little bit of the Amazon Prime subscription you're already paying them. Go to scameconomy.com for all the links to the podcast version of the show. Leave reviews at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever, and I will see you all next time in the Scam Economy.